Welcome, Kate Gimbalo.
Good morning. I have to start by saying that was divinely chosen. That is the song that I dedicated to my mother the day that it came out. And I went and got her from the other room and I sat her down in front of the speaker and I made her listen to it. And she has some of those lyrics in a frame from me with the feather of a bird. So thank you for that. Well, happy Mother's Day. You know, here at CSL, we have 7 core values. They are guiding principles for us, and they tell us who we are individually and as a community. You have to forgive me because I got a hug and now my speaker's out. You know, so today it's really appropriate that our core value is healing, because I'd really like to share some thoughts with you about healing and mothering and how those two things go hand in hand. You see, I've come to understand that anyone can be a mother. To mother means to shelter and guide someone. It's someone who is full of forgiveness, someone generous in helping others, and someone who places others' needs in front of their own. So as Mike said today, whether you are a man or a woman, whether you are someone who is the parent to a biological child or an adopted child, or even if you're just someone who imbues the world around you with those traits, today we really do honor each of you. I started on my spiritual path 14 years ago. I walked into CSL Fort Lauderdale. And early on in my spiritual practice, I really grew to understand that serving as a mother for me was something that I've always done, you know, for all of my friends, my family. But the greatest revelation for me was finding out that I needed to mother myself. You know, I think for each of us, there comes a time when we get to take over that job from our own parents. And I've done that in my spiritual practice ever since. You see, I think of my spiritual practices as living in a tool belt that I keep around me. And I have them all. I have meditation and chanting and prayer and forgiveness and service, and they're all there in that tool belt. And anytime I find a new one, I can just stash it in there, because there's always another opening in your tool belt, right? It's got all those pockets. Now, some I don't touch often. Others I take out every day. So what I thought I would do today, in the spirit of motherhood and in healing, is share with you one of those tools, truly the most life-changing one for me 14 years ago. But before I tell you that story, I have to tell you 2 others. I want to tell you the stories of 2 women that I know. I know them really well, and I love them equally. The first was born to an amazingly strong, talented, fabulous, loving mom and a fun-loving dad. Her first memory she talks about is dancing on a table in a honky-tonk to the music of Conway Twitty. She was loved, celebrated, told that she could do anything, that she could be anything. She traveled the world at an early age. She went on the greatest adventures. She scaled the Leaning Tower of Pisa at 10, walked up the Eiffel Tower at 11, and skied down the slopes of Switzerland at 13. She attended high school in Washington, D.C., watching the Supreme Court and the Senate, became a passionate advocate for the less fortunate and those who are disenfranchised. She started putting that advocacy into action when she marched on Washington for women's rights, almost arrested for having protested against the Iran hostage crisis. And she became a very active advocate for equal human rights. Academically successful, achieved straight A's in high school, went to college, graduated. She found love in her mid-20s and literally had the world lying at her feet at 36. You know, she's always been surrounded by friends. She's very quick to laugh. She's determined to make a difference in life, and she continues today to volunteer in any way that she can to be of service to others. She's one of those people that wherever she goes, people ask her, how can you be so happy? How are you so upbeat all the time? And often I hear people say, I wish I had just a little bit of what she has. God, I love being with that woman. The second woman that I want to share with you was born into what was already a broken home. Her father chose to have affairs at every turn, had an arrest warrant issued when his little daughter was just 8 months old because he'd gotten an underage girl pregnant. 10 years later, my friend's mom became a single mother of 4 when her father left to go live with his longtime girlfriend. At that time, the family had $20 in the bank and 2 pounds of ground meat in the freezer. Tough times. Her older siblings rebelled. They struggled, delved into drugs. One opted out of high school. My friend worked really hard to stay out of trouble. See, she served as the good girl in that family. And while she was greatly loved, her family was deeply distracted by those touches of mayhem and by their own experiences. She was sexually abused at the age of 12, and she never spoke of it to anyone, so afraid that it would taint her as less than perfect and that she would lose the love that she sought so much. Her little brother sadly struggled with the realities of that broken home as well in his own ways, and he reacted by acting out. Uncontrollable, resistant to discipline, and their mother reached her breaking point time and time again. My friend spent a lot of time crying into her pillow, trying to block out the sounds of her little brother being whipped. It all became too much for that struggling mom, and she ended up running away from home and from her children for a month, which left my friend to fend for herself and her little brother when she was just 16. So all of that resulted in a woman growing up not believing in unconditional love, never feeling herself truly worthy, never quite making the grade. She was afraid of relationships, not allowing herself to date in high school or college, passing through her teens without a shred of intimacy. She was accepted into great colleges, but sadly her mom had a car accident in her senior year, and the family was left without money and certainly not enough to afford a college career. She did finally get a scholarship to a college and eked out a graduate degree with honors, but very deeply in debt. She began to eat in excess after graduation, and by her mid-30s had ballooned to over 370 pounds. She found love at 25, but after 11 years, she found herself in a fractured relationship, really wondering, as she felt untethered, how her life would ever turn around. So here's the amazing thing about these two women, the commonality that they share. They're the same person. They're me. Like most of us, I have 2 very distinct stories that I can tell about my life. A life that has been filled with the joy and love and adventures that anyone would hope for, but also one that was filled with abuse, sorrow, and pain. It's when I came to realize that I get to mother myself, that I get to heal myself, that I actually realized that I get to decide which of those 2 stories and what they would mean to me as I move forward. I mean, how do I deal with the gunk in that second story? Well, there is one strong and true answer, and it takes me back to my spiritual tool belt. I now exist in a perpetual state of gratitude, and I think as a spiritual practice in the day-to-day moments of my life, that has the greatest effect on the quality of my life. But the spiritual practice of radical forgiveness is the one that changed my life. And it saved me from an ending that I think we can all see coming for that second friend. It was clear to me from the start of hearing about Colin Tipping's book called Radical Forgiveness that it was not going to be for the faint of heart. It took me 1 solid year of nightly work to shift my life. 1 year, 365 days. But the payoff is the life that I live now. I live a fearless life. I live a life that is filled with immense joy and the most amazing people. So I thought I would share with you the approach that radical forgiveness takes and see if in some way you might open yourself up to adding it to your own tool belt. So there are generally 3 steps to what I would call conventional forgiveness, right? 1, we tell our story from the land of victimhood. That one's fun, right? Victimhood is a very comfortable place to be. And telling that victim story over and over, oh, it feels so good. Oh. And the amazing thing is how many people there are who are willing to come and pull up a comfy chair and sit with you in victim land and share stories for hours about how you were wronged, how everybody hurt your feelings. Awesome. Step 2. While you're telling that story over and over ad nauseum to anyone who will listen, you get to feel the hurt and the pain over and over again. And then in conventional forgiveness, you get to that point, that breaking point, where you just want to move forward, you just want to stop hurting, and you decide, you know what? It's better for me to just forgive that person and move on. But let me ask you this. How many future experiences and relationships do you suppose are affected by the wrong that was done to us that we never truly resolve? Well, radical forgiveness shifts those 3 steps, and it adds 2 more. And it's those last 2 that are the radical part. I call it guerrilla warfare. So let me reframe the process for you. I want you just to take a moment, and I want you to think of someone that you want to forgive. Now, for the purposes of this being possibly your first journey down the path of radical forgiveness, don't pick somebody too big, right? Because the monsters in your life, honestly, they take some time and some practice to take them on. So let's start with a low to middle level bad guy, like one of the presidential candidates. I can think of one in particular. Or the first boy who broke your heart, right? Let's leave parents, abusers, ex-wives. Let's leave all that for later when you're a little more adept. So, radical forgiveness. Step 1, telling the victim story. So, radical forgiveness teaches us to fully express the story one good time. Now, I have to be honest. I'm going to fix this once and for all. Okay, I have to be honest now. In the beginning, you have to do it multiple times because it takes some practice. But you tell the story, each and every part, every ugly and hurtful piece. Now, you can tell it to someone else. I actually choose to tell it to myself. I find that involving others in my stories doesn't help me or them. And generally, anyone who loves me is going to want to defend me and demonize that person. It's kind of counterintuitive. So I'd like for you to just take a moment, that person who's in your head, and just relive that story for a moment about the wrongdoing that has happened to you. I'd assume it wouldn't take long because for most of us it's like a movie reel. You just hit play, right? Because we've played it so many times. So step 2, we feel the feelings. You know, as you're telling that story of how you were victimized, you want to be very present to your feelings about what happened. This is where the ugly crying normally comes in. I've mastered that. I allow myself plenty of time to wallow in the hurt, every bit of it, every ugly piece of it. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone break down here in CSL, but do let those feelings start to bubble up for your person. Third, after I've wiped my eyes and blown my nose, I collapse the story. So I take a few minutes to bring understanding, compassion, and empathy for the person that I'm upset with. I imagine walking in their shoes for a while. I work really, really hard to strip away interpretations, judgments, and expectations that I had, that I've added to that situation, and honestly, all they do is serve to increase my anger and suffering. I strip that away, and what that does is it leaves me with the actual facts of what happened, how things really were at the time. It's the difference between perception and reality. What's the reality? So do that for just a moment with your person. See if there's just one small aspect about that situation and your victimizer that you can actually start to understand where your bad guy is coming from. And even in this moment, right now, if you only gain one moment of seeing things from their side, you will have made progress. So far, this kind of falls into conventional forgiveness, right? Because you're trying to see things from the other side, but we're not really letting the victimizer off the hook. We still hold on to the belief that he or she did or is doing something wrong or bad to us. We haven't let go of victimhood, and that really is the limitation of conventional forgiveness. It cannot free us from victim consciousness. So radical forgiveness steps in with step 4. We work to reframe our upset and see it through fresh eyes. You got to stick with me through this. Through the eyes of being willing to look at the possibility that there is a spiritual purpose behind everything that happened, and that what happened to make us feel victimized was actually what our spiritual self wanted for its growth, and that our spiritual intelligence created that situation for us. Everyone breathe. I know. So listen, belief is not necessary at this point. All you have to be is willing to embrace it as a possibility. That's all I ask. Just a possibility that you are actually the one in control of it all. When we can embrace the willingness of possibility, we open ourselves up to seeing all things as divinely inspired, even those experiences that we wish had not happened. What if, just what if, your soul conspired with that other person on a spiritual level for them to show up as your bad guy for you? What if they did that to serve you, as requested by your soul, to allow some learning to happen? Look at your victimizer that you've been imagining today and see if there's even an inkling of possibility that they served you in some way. I can't begin to tell you how that perception will shift the moment-to-moment experiences of your life, because once you open yourself up to that possibility, you move to step 5, which is integrating the new story. Suddenly, you see past transgressions in a very, very different light. And the negative emotions just lift from your heart. You see your past hurts as a lesson. And amazingly, you start to see the blessings of what happened to your life because of those victim moments. How? How, you ask? Well, let's take one of my toughest ones. Just go for the jugular. The sexual abuse that I experienced. How in the world could there possibly be any good from that? Well, I don't wish that experience on anyone or the resulting damage done on anyone. But for me, it brought me 2 huge blessings. One, for my son, Jack. I am completely aware of the situations that he's placed in, even those that appear to be safe. You know, my abuse happened in public with people nearby. So I'm a better mom. More importantly, I'm open with Jack about his safety. And most importantly, I raise him as a child full of self-respect and strength, so his spirit has no need to be taught the lesson of having to stand up for himself. And the second blessing, the other gift, is that it gave me the determination to defend those who cannot defend themselves. I have always had an incredibly strong reaction to things that are unfair. That strong, taking advantage of the weak thing, it just brings out my inner warrior. And that is directly due to having felt so helpless. So again, let's go back to your person, to your bad guy. Is there some blessing buried in that experience? Did it make you stronger, more empathetic, more sure of who you are? Or maybe it just taught you the lesson of how much you're able to survive, how strong you are. Well, as you practice radical forgiveness, you find those blessings more and more. So imagine having embraced this approach and starting to integrate it into your life every day, sitting down literally every day and actually taking apart each victim story in your life all the way back. It's amazing how many there are. It's amazing how many we hold on to. So you work through the big, bad wolf ones. That's what I like to call them, like my abuser. And then you move to the ugly ones that you don't want to face, like those that are related to the immediate family members that you love. And then for me, I moved to the mid-sized ones I didn't even know were still affecting my life, like Chris Salmons. God, Chris Salmons bullied me for 4 years. Learned a lot from him. And then down to the little ones, the guy that rear-ended me and drove away, you know those, all of those. I got through them all. And it took months and months. But I promise you, it gets easier. It really does. And in the end, after all of that work, I realized there was one more batch of issues to face, one more very important person to forgive, myself. You know, all the ways in which I didn't show up for others, the ways in which I sat in judgment or withheld love or broke promises or dishonored people, and honestly, for the ways I treated myself. That added several more months. I came to understand what Oprah Winfrey meant when I read, "True forgiveness is when you can say, 'Thank you for the experience.'" And so at the end of my year, I was transformed. Literally transformed. And the biggest result is that I now live a life where I'm not wronged. And when there is some painful experience in my life, I really concentrate on loving that person through it and forgiving them, remembering that, they just don't know any better, people. I search for the reason behind it, asking, what did I need to learn or be reminded of? And it doesn't mean I keep those people in my life, because I don't. All this has taught me that I can love and respect people from afar. I know I say namaste all the time. As Chris says, sometimes you got to say namaste. It's the healthy thing to do. And it's not because they're less than me. It's not because they're wrong. It's just because they don't match my spiritual path. They don't match my place in life or my belief systems. I don't serve them. And the truth is, they don't serve me after they've taught me that lesson. I realize that, I can only mother those who are willing to accept the guidance, shelter, care, and love that I have to share, and those willing and able to mother me in return, to do the things for each other that I mentioned earlier, to shelter and guide each other, to be full of forgiveness for each other, to be generous and helping each other, putting others' needs in front of our own. My tribe. My healthy, spiritually driven, emotionally mature, fearless, truthful, loving, and funny tribe. And I count you amongst them. So, back to those women I shared with you. How are they now? Well, they don't try to be perfect. They don't have to. They are both loved for exactly who they are. I honor both of their journeys. I mother them both. And my wish for each of you, as you step out of this room today and into your future, is that you're able to celebrate the mother spirit within you, and that you use that spirit to heal and grow and to mother yourself. Happy Mother's Day. And so ends the lesson. Thank you. Thank you. We have an affirmation that we send with you each week. And if you would read this with me, I would be most honored. I let go of victim consciousness as I embrace forgiveness as a spiritual practice. Thank you.